callous. I'm going away for Shabbos.
It's got to be packed.
Just got to put it in.
You want me to put it in the suitcase?
Yeah, but you don't have to do it now. Just to remember. Do it now.
Yeah. Who's packing the medicines and food?
That what's a Dale is taken care of. So that. But Erev Shabbos, everyone. Before we start, I'd like to make a comment about Parshas Vayikra, about Sefer Vayikra. The Gemara says you should learn Vayikra with little children, because holy ones should come to talk about holy things. I don't even know what that means. I mean, we don't even understand what Kabbanis mean. Expect little kids to understand it. So what's the purpose of learning Vayikra with little kids? And you see, Take, most yeshivas really don't understand it. And what they learn with little kids is Bereshis. I think they find it more interesting, a lot of stories in there. Very nice. And Vayikra is boring, if you want to call it that. So, what it says in the Gemara, so what are you going to do? So they learn the first pasuk at least. Some learn the first parsha. Not the Seder, the first parsha. I haven't heard of anyone who actually learns the first Seder, but possibly there are. But nobody learns Vayikra. And my belief is, if they would actually learn Vayikra the way with kids, in a way that would teach kids Vayikra. I'm not talking about learning it in the depth of that you have to teach it and what do you call it. The way kids would learn Vayikra, they would be able to learn the lessons of life that would protect them from ever doing Averos in the future. I'm not talking about Taiva. Taiva is a thing that the Bensham brings for other reasons, and Memela it affects you even in the even good people. But I'm talking about Hashkof Averos. They all would have been solved because they would have been absorbed and the person was a child. And as a child, those things remain with you. If you notice, there are people, even Freiyid, and I remember this, that a guy would stop his mail truck in front of the shul on Yom Kippur to run in to say Yiska, because Yiska was very important because his father did it. What made Yiska more important than any other part of the davening? But that what he remembered. So in other words, things that stick in the head, remember that doesn't make a difference what you're doing, who you become, you keep them. And if we would actually learn Vayikra with the kids, we wouldn't have any Ganovim in the world. We'd have everybody would be satisfied with whatever they have, and all the main Yetzaharos that exist in the world, and those things and the kin and the sin and everything else would be gone. And now we'll talk a little bit about these things. Okay. The Torah starts off Vayikra with a little small aleph. And as Rashi brings down the whole discussion between Moshe Rabbeinu and the Rabbeinu Shalom, that the Rabbeinu Shalom wanted to write Vayikra the regular way, with a big aleph, like the other word. And Moshe wanted him to write the word Vayokar, which means that he met him, not that he called him. Called him is like a special finny. I called to my friend. I just don't meet my friend someplace. So Vayokar is he met him. But as far as the Torah goes, the validity of the Torah, that this is considered Torah and this is not, does not depend on the level of the Devuah that it was given. Because we find that Bilam, whatever it means, I don't know what it means. that the level of the nevuah that came to Bilam is considered Torah, even though it was at the low level of Vayikra. And therefore, the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah came with Vayikra would be completely unnecessary. It's just a point of showing who Moshe Rabbeinu was, giving him extra covet, in the sense that he's the Adon HaNeviim, and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want it. Now, it's very nice what the Rebbeinu Shem knew what Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want, but obviously the Rebbeinu Shem did want it. And the Rebbeinu Shem not only did not listen to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he put in the Aleph, he put the Aleph with a little one, so people ask the question, why is it a little one? And then they come to the point that Moshe didn't want it, and God did want it, and therefore the true lesson will come out. But the funny thing comes out that it affords Moshe Rabbeinu a bigger covet than he would have if he had a regular Aleph. A regular Aleph, I don't think anybody would have realized one way or the other. But once you have the little Aleph, all of a sudden you think, why is it little Aleph? So you start asking the question. Once you ask the question, oh, Moshe Rabbeinu, he's the Adon HaNeviim. Oh, isn't that a bigger guy than if he had a big Aleph? A big Aleph, no one would have known it. Little Aleph, we know about it. So why did the mention put him such a matziv? I believe that the idea is that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't just get nevuah because the Rebbeinu had to speak to him. You find such a thing. You find by Lavan, by Bilam even, maybe to a certain extent, that the Rebbeinu had to speak to him to take away the excuses from the Goyim, that we had Nevi'im by Goyim, stuff like that, and I gave him an equal chance. Whatever the taina was, I had to give it to them, whether they deserved it or not. Moshe Rabbeinu deserved his nevuah. He worked on his nevuah a whole lifetime. He tried to become the closest to Hashem, which he did become, the closest Hashem there ever was. And because of that, the Rebbeinu wanted pointed out that every person has to reach that level. Whatever the level is, not obviously Moshe Rabbeinu's level, but the level that he is permitted to give, that Rebbeinu gave him the ability to reach. In other words, his potential. And that's very important, that a person should want to reach his potential. And that's what the Rebbeinu is stressing here. So it's a point that even though Moshe personally hit it very well, because he hit it even from his sister and his brother, they did not realize that he was a different level of war than they were. But L'maiseh, the Rebbeinu wants it advertised that that's what we have to aim for. So the Rebbeinu put the little aleph regardless of Moshe's request or not. Now the Rebbeinu, now we use a lotion for korban sacrifices. He even uses 6 million korbanos. Right? That's 6 million sacrifices. A sacrifice, by definition, is that I give to someone else. I sacrifice for myself. I take away something for myself and I give it to God. And the truth is, a korban is not a sacrifice. It's a korban. I draw closer to Hashem and become mikurev, close to Hashem with a korban. I'm not sacrificing anything. And it's the opposite of sacrifice. When a person feels he's giving a sacrifice, that means he's giving something to God. That means he feels that God needs something from him, that he possesses that God doesn't possess. And there's no such thing, because then God is not complete. God doesn't need anything from us. So therefore, why do we bring it? Because we want to get closer to Hashem, which I'll explain in a minute. But we see the opposite. When someone brings it as a point of I'm giving something to Hashem, the Rebbeinu doesn't like it. He doesn't even consider it. A korban, if it is the person who comes to give it to Chomus Chatzerai, people are trampling my courtyard, you don't belong here, I don't want what you have. And this is poured out in Parshas Chazoin, Shabbos Chazoin, in the Haftarah of Yeshaya, that he claims anyone that feels you give a lot of korbanos to God, that you're doing him a favor, you're not doing him any favor. God doesn't eat. doesn't smell, not in our context anyway, anything that we can understand. And then what do we have korbanos for? The korban is basically for the person himself to draw closer to Hashem. Now, how does he do that? This is the way my theory of the korban oila. I say theory because I don't really have any big proof of it, but the way I understand it. Korban oila is given completely to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning to the Mizbeach. Nobody has any enjoyment from it. The only thing that remains from the korban is the skin, which is given to the Kohen that's marked of the oila. The skin can be tanned, it can be made into leather. That's about all the basics you're going to get out of it. And I would assume if you came from a korban, the person is going to use it for making a sefer Torah or something else like that out of it. I assume he can use it for anything, but basically that's what he's probably going to do. So there's nobody gains anything from it. Every other korban that we have, chatas, shlomim for sure, mincha, is eaten by somebody. Eaten by a kohen, eaten by the bailim. But the edible food that's mutter by halachic, and anyway, it's not fat, it's not chaylev, and it's not what they call it, that all of that is going to be eaten. Stuff that we can't eat, that's going on the mizbeach. So basically, there's no loss in the actual behemoth. The question is, why am I bringing it and stuff like that at this particular time? But there's no loss of money involved. Over here, you're going to take an animal which can be tremendous value, and just simply kill it. So what's the purpose?
They still give madness kahuna, the chazer and shake and everything else. They still lose out their part on the bring korban.
Yeah, but not a korban oila.
No, on regular
Yeah,
korban.
you know what I'm saying? So that's for every korban they eat. Yeah, I'm saying they eat. Everything is eaten up. So what I feel is this. We all make statements all of the time, and I hope that we believe it, at least that we hope that we believe it, is that everything that we possess is from God. But they're only words. And when they're only words, they don't necessarily go that deep. A person can say it very nicely, and I'll give you a marshal. If you have somebody who got $1 million in the bank, fluid, right? And he says, Gott wird helfen. Very easy for him to say Gott wird helfen. He's got money in the bank. A guy who has nothing, he says Gott wird helfen. What else is he supposed to say? A guy who has just enough, and he gives away from himself to something else, and he says Gott wird helfen, that guy believes. How many people are in that actual situation? And I don't know. But that's a situation that a person is supposed to bring himself in to actually prove to himself that he believes that God will help him. It doesn't mean anything. So the korban oila, I think, l'chatchila is brought for a person to come to that recognition. That recognition. Now, how do you become to that recognition? I will have to take a korban, and you notice in the Parsha there are different levels of prices in the korban oila, starting from an ox to a sheep and goat, to birds, to even flour, and the mincha, in other words, but they're all called the korban oila in that sense. They're all going to say the same concept, with different price ranges. The reason for the price ranges is because a person has different values of what money is. I remember as a kid, in the comics, they used to talk about the mafia. They would always have the mafia boss lighting his cigars with a $5 bill. So by the time $5 bill as a kid was considered a tremendous amount of money. Probably now you probably have them with $100 bill. Okay? But it's the same thing. It's the same idea. Money is meaningless to them. And to a person that $1,000 is nothing, so $1,000 is nothing. How many times have you found, I mean, we don't have too many toll takers anymore, but when you used to have a toll taker and the toll was $10, and you give him a $10, I mean, it was $1, and you give him a $10 bill, and he'd give you a pack of singles back, right? And you obviously can't count them at that spot, because if you did, the guy behind you is hunking terribly, and maybe you'll tolerate it if you want to actually know how much you got. And you drive for about a mile till you can pull off the wheel and put the money in your pocket, and you find there's only 8. Are you going back? He stiffed you for $1. It happens quite often. And you going back? Or when you go online in the store, and the checker cashier cheated you $1 or something, by accident maybe, or real, will you go back to complain? $10 maybe you'll go back and complain. $1 you won't go back and complain, it's not worth it. Right? They gotta believe it, they can't prove it, this and that, so what am I gonna go back for? So you're gonna say, okay, I lost $1, big deal, right? There's a line where you're gonna say big deal until when it becomes I'm going back. Whatever that line is, obviously depending how much money you have. Okay. Take that amount of money and buy a korban with it. Whether it's a sheep, goat, whatever it will be. Whatever the need you have. And obviously there are people in the world who even that is a small amount of money to what we know now. But those people, even no matter what, since in reality, when they talk about the billions, you don't live with the billions. You don't eat billions. You eat food for regular dollars. And everybody relates to regular dollars. I would say that everybody would relate to something like $10,000, no matter if you're a billionaire or not. $10,000 is still an amount of money that you consider a loss, a nice amount of money. Take an animal of that cost, something, a special breed or whatever it is there, and be matched with it with the concept of understanding that if God wanted me to have it, he would give it to me again. Right? In other words, I believe that it comes from God. So obviously I have it. There is a mitzvah of korban olah to express this type of machshava. So I'm interested in expressing it. How am I expressing it? By going in and killing it, destroying it, getting no use out of it on the mizbeach, because it's a mitzvah, I want to do the mitzvah of it, and not feel the loss at all. It shouldn't even feel a twinge that there goes $10,000. Right? And that's what we do. We shecht it. And if that twinge doesn't come, then you pass the test. Then you actually believe that everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you're not a problem. Wonderful. What happens if you get the twinge? Ooh, there goes $10,000. Then you didn't pass. And the korban really should be a wasted korban. It should be chulun ba'azorah because you didn't pass. You didn't really believe that, what you said, but you don't know it until you do what I told you, until you shechted it. You didn't know that you really felt that way. And the only way you felt that way, you know about it, is exactly when it's done. I do a similar thing that people should understand. When, let's say, they come with the questions of, they have two equal sides of a question. Which one should they do? And I say to them, first you have to prove to yourself that they're equal. How am I going to prove to myself they're equal? I believe 100% they're equal. So I tell them, flip a coin. They look at me like I'm crazy. Flip a coin's going to decide if I really want this or that. Yeah, try it. If you really believe, flip a coin. And it falls out on one side, and you feel in yourself, oh, I wish it would have fallen on the other side. Why do you feel that way? Because you really wanted the other side. But you didn't know that until it actually fell on this side. And if a taka doesn't fall out, it doesn't make a difference, then do what it says. But if it makes a difference, you'll know. And that's the point that we want you to know. We want you, you're madrege. You're out to prove who you are. So show me who you really are. Are you? No. So then you have to start again. And he has to do this all over again. And obviously, hopefully, the next time he'll pass. This is the Korban V'Noila. Korban V'Noila, by that, meaning there are graduations in a person's emunah, in his avodah, or anything else. And for that reason, I believe maybe the Korban V'Noila is used also for kapore, for Eiver Anessa. You know, love, when a person is Eiver love, you know it pretty clearly. And I truly don't believe people will go to be Eiver love. I mean, there's certain things, like, look, I can't answer about certain taivas that exist. I mean, everybody may have such a taiva. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about a guy who will eat like chaza. Never ate chaza this life. He's going to go eat chaza now? I don't believe it. He's going to go eat, if he's in Eretz Yisrael and they bring him now shai lavola and something like that, and he's hungry for the food and stuff like that, maybe he'll be able on something like that. But the eating chaza, you're not going to be able. And that I'm sure of. And whatever averas that a person has, lavim, the odds are you won't be doing it. But the kaish is on an esse, that you do an esse. Guy puts on, I go on and have kavanah to do the mitzvah. You really have kavanah? You have the full kavanah you're supposed to have? Well, I got 3/4 of the kavanah. I got a half of the kavanah. I got a tenth of the kavanah. I have some shaykhs to the kavanah, but I don't have the kavanah that God wants me to have. And therefore, we haven't yet reached the madrege of really being an Eved Hashem and stuff like that. I'll give you a moshel. A love, okay, that, as I say, we don't expect somebody. But imagine this is an essay. The king says to you, can you bring me a cup of coffee? Right? So the guy goes out, of course, going to bring King a cup of coffee. And he gets to the coffee maker, and there stands standing his friend he hasn't seen in a while. So they get into a schmooze. Meanwhile, the king is waiting for his cup of coffee. And you come back into the king, you bring a cup of coffee. Oh, I forgot. And the king, where was my coffee? I forgot from the king. Did you do what the king wanted? Which is the bigger insult to the king? Doing something you have a taiva for where you said you shouldn't do it, but I couldn't control myself? Or doing something that I asked as a favor to do for me? So obviously the favor is a bigger insult to the melech than if you don't do it. So you do, and you haven't done it, you haven't done the proper kavanah, that's a big insult. So go and do it. That's where you need kapara for all the time. A person has to always be aware, and as I say, just like we're aware of how much God gives me, to what degree, and how much I believe it, and that's what I'm trying to bring the korban for to grow in. So this is also part of that growth. Now, let's take the korban Eilah does something else also as a thing. I believe God gave it to me, right? Because if I see I get it. This I can only prove by animals. If I brought an animal, korban Eilah is an animal. And why do I say that? I remember when I was a kid living on the east side, all the electronic stores were all on Canal and Essex streets. They were going down Essex and over to Canal, like that. And one after the other, one store after the other. Some were fancier, some were less fancy. Some had people that were nicer, some people that were less nice. And yet, the prices were about $50 in between, the most expensive to the cheapest. And which one was the cheapest, the most expensive? You're going to have to go store to store. to find out. And it didn't make a difference. He went into this one, you dealt with this guy, he charged you $1 more on this item, charged you $1 less on this item. Whatever it is that you figure out, you evened out, and you like the guy, you deal with him, and that's the way it is. Okay? Now everybody makes sure that their store is away from other stores, so all that area is exclusively his. And the other stores is exclusively that area. Exclusively that area. You don't need that. The guy comes down to buy, the same thing used to be for the Shmuel Matzah companies. I remember they all went right after the other one after the other. Everything open. You didn't have to have in different parts of the city. They went right in the same place. Because you're walking into one store over another is up to God. A guy can advertise, a guy can give presents, a guy can give anything they want. But to make you come into their store, ultimately, is going to be a message from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That I went into their store. So the fact that a person is matzliach in a store, that is, he realizes it depends a lot on God. Because it's not up to him. How does that apply to life? Everyone agrees that no matter what pet you have, no matter how good you take care of a pet or an animal, ultimately how long it lives or dies is up to the Reuven Shlit. And there's nothing much you can do about that. And therefore people realize that. And they appreciate it. It's also a grace madrege, the Korban Olam. And but what about when a guy says, I work, I'm a cleaning lady, or I'm ditch digger, and I dig ditches. That's my keach. I did it. I was able to do it. That when you recognize that it's not yours, that's a mincha. That means the work that you put in to get bread, that you allow balachas, which is you need, for actual bread for flour, you need 10. But I mean, whatever it is, probably less than 10. But whatever you need, that is for the flour. But for the actual something edible, you're going to need 11 balachas. And to be able to do it. That's a lot of work that you did. 11 out of 30... 11 out of 31. It's a lot of malachas you did to make a piece of bread, right? And yet, we don't consider it mine. In other words, I was able to do it, but the Reuven Shalom, you gave me the ability, you gave me the care, you actually advised me to do it. Whatever it is that we're going to teach you, how it becomes all of my work is Reuven Shalom's gift to me. I didn't do anything. That's the Korban Mincha. And once upon a time, there were two madreges. Madrege first the Korban Olam, and then they bring Korban Mincha. There's a higher madrege in the Korban Mincha concept. But the truth is that now, after it really comes out after Chetem Meraglim, it's not something for now. We'll talk about then when we get to Bamidbar. But after the Chetem Meraglim, it became that every oiler had to bring a mincha also. And the idea was, if you're not in the madrege of bringing a mincha, don't bring the oiler. You're not ready for that either. Even though the oiler we said you can very easily be ready for, because I understand that something has to do with life, or choice, or things like that is up to the Reuven Shalom. But something that has to do with physical, that's up to me. No, if you don't understand it, then don't bring it. Because then we have two different concepts. And there's no two. Everything I have, everything I possess is min HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the point that you have to bring out. Okay. Now, it talks about how the Reuven Shalom made an Eish on the Mizbeach. It was a Mizbeach. They happened on the Shemini L'Meluyim. The fire came down on Hashemayim. And burnt and lit the Mizbeach, and burnt the Korbanos on the Mizbeach. Why was that necessary? And that fire never gets extinguished. That fire was traveled with them. They were able to contain it, whatever it means, how they did it. Obviously, the Nisim were talking on Nisim all the time. But the idea is that fire never was extinguished. And every day we had to add, what do you call it, Shteikes Yitzim, in order to continue it, but we didn't continue that fire. That fire continued by itself. There's a mitzvah of Shnei Gizayetzim, whatever the mitzvah is, maybe we'll talk about it sometime, but not right now. But anyway, there was a fire. Now, what was the point of it, fire benching? Why don't we just make a fire? We want to make a korban, okay. Put the korban on the mizbeach and light a fire. Why do we need that the fire should be there already? We find the early korbanos by the Gedei Le'elam, Odom, Cain, Hevel. They brought korbanos, but they didn't know what to do with it. They put it on the mizbeach, and then if the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted it, either fire or some other thing came down and took it, disappeared. And if God did not want it, it stayed there. By Yitzchak, God wanted him, so he told him to put him on the mizbeach. He didn't tell him to kill him, he just says put him on the mizbeach. But I happen to want this particular korban to live. I want to show that it's a korban. I told you to bring him as a korban. So I don't need more than just put him on the mizbeach. He doesn't have to disappear. When you bring a korban and you want to know if I accepted it, then it has to disappear. And that was the way of, and we don't find too many korbanos that were brought by the Oversalem. But it came down to Noach. And Noach went and he brought the korbanos from all the animals after the Mabel. And somehow the kavanah of Noach, which I can't understand and I don't understand it, was such a high level that the Rebbeinu Shalom says, "Vayoach Hashem es reach hanichoyach," that there was a reach hanichoyach that Noach was able to create, that Hashem smelled. Not the Rebbeinu Shalom made it a reach hanichoyach by accepting it. He pushed through any negativeness on the part of the Rebbeinu Shalom not to accept it, and therefore that was his godless. But till him, you don't find anyone bring him a korban that they made the fire themselves. Yet for some house by the Keda, Avram thought that was what the command was. Okay, could be. That he had to make the fire himself. But that shows acceptance, that's the point. I want you to bring such a high madrega of acceptance, or I accepted it. What about what we talked about before? The guy flunked. He thought he really believed, but when it came down to the Maisa, you saw that he had that twinge, and he really didn't believe. So if he didn't believe, technically we said it should be chum bazar. You didn't make a korban. It's not a good korban. So the Rebbeinu Shalom tells us, I want you to keep trying. If you stop trying, you're not going to make it. I want you to keep trying. And that's the point that he brings over here. I want you to keep trying. I think I mentioned this once before about the union of benching. There's a Gemara that says that Yisa Hashem Panav Elechem Yisbach Shalom, God will show favoritism to you. And the Malachim came to the Rebbeinu Shalom and said, you said, Lo Yisa Panim, you don't show favoritism. So how can you say I show favoritism to the Jews? It's unfair. So the Rebbeinu Shalom answers, what should I do? I was commanded that you have the bench only if you're satisfied. Meaning, I don't expect gratitude until you are fully satisfied. But when you're fully satisfied, I expect gratitude. And you come along, you eat a kazayas and kebeya, and you bench. And you show gratitude right away, right? So that's, the seems it's a big thing, right? If let's say I would do it by a chotzi kazayas, right? What would you say? It's a bracha l'matala. What are you talking about? It's a mitzvah, it's not a mitzvah, it's a bracha l'matala. So why don't we say the same thing over here? It's a bracha l'matala. You ate a kazayas, you ate a bay, you're not chayiv to bench until you ate what do you call it? Until you're full. So it's a bracha v'atala. You say it's the Rabbanan, that's what we're talking about. The Rabbanan made the mitzvah. Why would they make such a mitzvah? To make brachas v'atala. It doesn't make sense. So I believe that what the Gemara is saying is there are Jews that reach the madrega of gratitude even when they're not full. I give you for that little bit that you gave me, I feel gratitude for. And I'm showing it. You want to show gratitude, you have to bench. And that's the Raisa. It answers a lot of questions, not negative for now. It answers a lot of questions. Maybe that becomes a Raisa. That if I were to show gratitude, I have to bench actually. And therefore the Rabbanan came along and they said, what we got to do, we see that Jews that can reach this madrega. If they can reach this madrega, let's make it that they have to bench normally. They always have to bench. Maybe they'll understand it, and when they get to that madrega, they'll actually reach that madrega. So we have to keep practicing that we'll reach that madrega. But till we reach that madrega, there's going to be a lot of misses. And those misses, if they're not going to put korbanos, and there'll be averas, people can't bring it. So a guy can't try. There's no gain. So the idea is, the Benishim said, I'll make the fire. I'll make the fire, and therefore the ones that I think will actually trying to reach that madrega, I'll accept the korbanos. Obviously, others I won't accept. Like we said, they won't do me a favor, I don't accept. So this he also won't accept. But I'm just saying, but those he would accept. Okay. We have an interesting thing. It says, if his korban is min aksavim or min ha'izim. Now Rashi, I don't remember what the Rashi is, but there is a Rashi that says the word kesev and keves are interchangeable. Now they both mean sheep. And what all you really did is change the vase and the shin, kvasim, and the sin, or ksavim. In other words, and it's interchangeable. And I want to show that I don't think it's so. We took it from all the Lashonos of Tanakh, from Concordia, and wrote it up someplace. I don't have all the cases where we answered them by my hand, but we did it. And the idea was I wanted to claim that they both mean sheep, but the terminology is only used for chulin. Kesev is only used for chulin or kochim kalim. Kochi kedoshim is always the word shnei kvasim shnei son. Yeah, shnei kvasim. There wasn't that used the kevis, used the higher loads. Now there are going to be from this said the goof of what I just said. There are going to be contradictions to what I just said. So obviously I'm going to try and answer them that it shouldn't be contradictions. But that's what that's what I want to say. But here he uses the terminology ksavim or minizim because he hasn't made it holy yet. If you want to take from sheep and make it into an oila, so right now it's chulin, and you want to make it so then the word ksavim is the proper terminology. Okay. Then you have a korban shlomim, which the Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal, Kotzim Shalom, the shlomim, there's gone to questions why to call it shlomim. One, because it makes peace in the world. God gets a piece, the Kehanim get a piece, the Bailam get a piece. Okay, that's one thing. Are we eating the Bailam's food? Are we eating God's food? Ultimately, by saying we're making shalom, I guess at the point we're eating God's food. But there is the concept of the Bailam brought the korban itself, stuff like that. When a person's going to eat kochim Yotze Hashem, Beis Hamikdash, all of us are going to eat chol hapochos Korban Pesach for sure. Right? And in the Korban Pesach, there are different types of meat that are edible, that are chayav to be eaten. And I get my chelik from whatever they give me. There's no guarantee I'm going to get the part I wanted. Right? So they didn't give me the rib steak. They didn't give me the lamb chop. They gave me the fat, total fat. They gave me the brains. They gave me the milts. Whatever parts that a person normally does not eat. And he says, I won't eat it. You're not going to do that. You're actually going to sit down and eat that, the portion they gave you. I assume it's going to be gezayis at least. And you're going to make a bracha al chilas kochim on it. And you're going to be in seventh heaven by eating it. But I don't like it. How's it possible? So Shiva used to give a moshel, depending, I guess, who you are. If your Rebbe will call you in and he wants to talk to you, or the President of the United States is going to call you in and he wants to talk to you, and while they're talking to you, they're going to serve you tea. And you're one of those people that don't drink tea unless they're sick. So when someone asks you, did you have tea? You tell them, I'm not sick, and therefore you're not drinking tea. And you're going to drink tea with the president or with the Rebbe. And when your friend meets you outside and he asks you, what happened inside? Well, we had tea. He said, but you don't like tea. Oh, what a ruchnistic experience that was. I haven't been in such a badrege in my life. But you don't like tea. I wasn't drinking tea. I was in a different world because I was drinking the Rebbe's tea. It's not the same thing. Okay. So the point is sometimes it's not what you're eating, it's how you eat it. It's a thing that when it's the Rebbe's tea, it's a different tea. It's not tea. It's ruchnis, or whatever it is. A person is supposed to feel that feeling whenever he's eating. There's no such thing as saying, I don't like this, I do like this, that. Sometimes your body, for whatever reason, rejects it, that I understand. There are possibilities, whether it's allergies or simply something that's done by, controlled by medications or whatever it is, that all of a sudden you have different tastes or whatever it is. But under normal circumstances, you should be able to eat anything. And if you can't eat it, you eat it because it comes from God's table. The reason you're able to eat today because God gave you food. Other people, He didn't give food, and He gave you food. You should be thankful it comes from God's table. You should always feel it comes from God's table. I have no trouble eating it. The only thing I trouble eating it is when it comes from your table. When it comes from God's table, I can eat it. And that's the point of a shlomo. That to realize the relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, even to that fact, the food I put in my mouth is from God. It's not just, I have food. I don't have food. Food is given to me by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's a tremendous lesson, again, for us to learn. That everything we have, to the point of usage, it could very well be, I'm not getting involved in this now because the flesh and shame sometimes may not be like that, but I always want to explain the Gemara that says that whatever a person spends, or what's the Lashon his food is a portion on Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't use, the Gemara doesn't use the Lashon of his income is decided on Rosh Hashanah. Even though I'm saying there's some Rishonim that use that Lashon, that's why I'm not getting involved, but I want to explain the difference in between the income and what's Lashon is Onosov, which seems to be my expenditures. My expenditures are what is decreed on Rosh Hashanah. Now, with my ability to be able to spend $50,000 is decreed on Rosh Hashanah. I only earned $40,000 this year, so how did you spend 50? because I saved 10 in before. So the 10 before is not counting the year that I earned it, because I didn't spend it. I didn't have any enjoyment out of that money. Say in the bank, maybe I enjoy being a kaifer by saying, oh, I got money in the bank, so I'm safe. But that's not being frum. That's being a shegitz. But the idea that's in the bank means that I have the ability to spend it in years later. I think the Rebbeinu Shem did that for us. Al Chayu, what he make package for them since he said, Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, Erev Rosh Hashanah, we should have a big party. Take out all the money, burn it, has no purpose anymore. And we start again from next year. New Gzeres. What's the point of saving last year's? Because last year's I'm able to use for this year. And the reason I'm able to do that is the Rebbeinu doesn't require me to change my parnassus. Since every year we have to do shtadlus, we have to do enough effort to being able to bring in that much money and stuff there. And obviously, in certain years I'm going to need more money than I need other years. My daughter's getting married, my son's making bar mitzvah, other simchas that we have in the family, or other big expenses. So obviously we need more money than the normal, and I don't earn it. I have a way of having it without doing a ness. And that's the what he called. So therefore, the money is counted the year of expenditure, not on the year of earning it. I think that's an important lesson also. Then he comes in the union of a chatos. Now, a chatos means a person didn't have a they were koris b'shoigig. Why you chayiv a korban b'shoigig? Because when you goof and you didn't realize that you did something, b'shas ma'asor, that was an avera, either you didn't get there yet, you didn't care about it, whatever it is. And all of these things are important to know that there's no such thing as that. In English, I think it's ignorance of the law is no excuse. And that's basically what it's telling you. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. If you cared what the law is, meaning in the case of the cops and what they call ignorance of the law, I'm not really interested to know all the what do you call the laws of driving and stuff like this is mutar rasa. But Devar Hashem, God gave you the Torah, and He wants you to know what's right and wrong. That you're supposed to know, and you're supposed to want to know. And that the fact is that you don't know, that's a problem with you already. So we did something wrong. We have to bring a korban for it. So it tells you what type of korbanos. A Kohen HaMashiach, which is the Kohen Gadol, has to bring a korban only when it's in Vayikra to a psak halacha. He can't just forget that this was chaylev or not chaylev, or there's an issa chaylev or something like that. That he also know. He has to say that this thing is mutar, and then come to the conclusion that he was wrong, and then he brings a korban. Why? A regular person is just started eating chesed. A Kohen Gadol can't forget. A Kohen Gadol must always be in a point that he's knowledgeable of everything and aware of everything. That's just saying, he is our representative in Ruchnis Ba'ilam, and he has to be in that madrege. If he's not in that madrege, he can't be Kohen Gadol. So that's a very important thing. Then comes the tzibur, which by them only has a halacha, where they've made a mistake in the halacha. And then there's, what do you call it, the nosi, which would be the king or the leader or the shayfet or whoever he is at the time. And he has to bring a special korban, because he, again, maybe he's not as knowledgeable as the others are, or has to be, but whatever he does, he shows a way of doing it, because he's the leader, and everybody will follow. And therefore, it's very important that everyone realizes what he did, and that was a mistake. Now, in the korban of the yochid, then the things bound of an individual does, and each one has a different type of korban, so you should recognize what it is. Now, my raya before, when we talk about kesef and kevis, is that we're talking about in the part of he has to bring a kevis, right? And kevis we said is the holy name, right? Meaning the kachim name, and that's from kesef yovid korban. If he brings a kesef horse korban, it's already a chatus, said it is. So that fits with the words. So it says by the kevis, by the yochid, lokach hakem minam hachatas, and it's on the next pasuk. It comes to pasuk lamed hey. Veskol chelba. He said, "Where all the chel of yosim asher yusa chelav hakesev yizevach hashlamim." And all of a sudden, he used the word kesev from the shlamim. Why did he change over here from kevis to kesef? It's the same parsha. Using, okay, it's interchangeable, but interchangeable in the same parsha. Like, why would you do that? To teach you that if he's talking about a shlomim is kochikalam. Kochikalam, it's kesef. Again, we're talking the chatas, it's kevis. So even though it's the same animal, but one's a kevis and one's a kesef, you should realize that. That was my raya originally, to prove the point that it meant that such a thing. Now there's a korban oil v'yoret. That means that you bring it to chatas. It's a din of chatas, but there are 3 levels in it. Normal chatas only has 1 level. A cow. I mean a sheep. I mean a goat, whatever it is there, but female. But by a but in what do you call it? In oil v'yoret, you have 3 madregas. Okay, so again, one is the sheep, one is the birds, one is the mincha. Why? So it talks about 3 specific averos that are called ha'lוי. One of them is, and this is a lot of people have this concept that, leave me out of it. The guy's standing on a corner and 2 of his friends crash into each other. And they both jump out of the car. And they say to him, "You saw, whose fault was it, right? And you want to be, you were friends with both of them. Leave me out of it. I don't want to tell you. I don't want to get involved." You got to get involved. You got to say what you saw, and you got to tell the truth. And that's the point that we have. A person, when it comes to money, there's no such thing as saying, "Leave me out of it." You're a witness. You have to take responsibility of being a witness. Hopefully your friend will understand that. But if he doesn't, then he wasn't truly a friend of yours. That's one. Second one is a guy who does tumah. There's a lot of tumah around. We're Baruch Hashem, we're more nizel than others, because we things are uchi to us, so we don't touch them. But in their time, they live more down to earth. There's a lot of tumah around. And they get tummy. And they touch sometimes kachim and things like that, sort of, they eat them, whatever it is there. So again, you're not allowed to do that. Then there's one where people say, "I promise, I swear." Right? And I don't know without the shame if it's an emes shvur, but we're not talking about that. But why do you say those words at all? Because obviously you don't trust me, or I think you don't trust me. And I want you to believe me, so I try to stick in some extra words that seem to mean that I really mean it, right? So those words are quite common. Those are big averos, all 3 of them, if it's not true. So for those, and it's quite common, so we need people to be forgiven. So we can't just let them alone. For that, Taki uses also the lashon kesef in there, because the idea is that everybody, it's a chatas, it's kodesh kadoshim, but it's common. It's just like kodesh kalim. So I want you to be aware of it, that we need every bit to be able to be skapel from his averos, and these are common averos, what to do in skapel. Okay. Then he talks about the Korban Osham. And the Osham comes for an Asham Me'ilis. The guy comes along and he uses Kachim for his own personal use. Whatever it is. He walked into the thing, he didn't realize it's Kachim. He took it out, it's Kodesh Melech, and not Kachim, because it's not a Korban, but it belongs to Hegdish. And he uses it for his own personal purposes, and he has to bring a Me'ilah. Korban Me'ilah, and he has to pay for it, whatever it is. So this is the Lashon. Nefesh Kishimo Mal, the guy made Me'ilah, V'chota B'shkoga, Mikotche Hashem, and he made a mistake from holy things. So he brings the Lashon. So it just seems to be an Aveira, like any other Aveira. You're not allowed to touch Kachim, and you did, so you got to bring a Korban. Okay. Now we'll get to one of the other lessons we were talking about that's very important for children to know. What does it talk about? The Asham Gzelis. He made a Me'ilah in God, not in something that belongs to Hegdish. In God. How do you make Me'ilah in God? How do I lessen God? By saying he can't do something. So what do you steal? When a person steals, what is he saying? He's saying, I'm taking what God doesn't want to give me. I'm taking it because he doesn't want to give it to me. I have the ability to take it when God doesn't want to give me. That means God can't stop you. That means or God hasn't got the ability to give it to me. If God would hurry up and give it to me, I wouldn't have to steal it. If he would have given it himself. Therefore, God can't give it to me. Either one is saying the Me'ilah in God, is lessening God's power. Now you're a Shegetz, you're not Bekelis. You're not just a thief. Yes, that's a desire. You're a crook. You're a guy who's a kaifel. And the person has to realizes that he won't steal. In other words, if I really believe in God and I'm supposed to get it, why should I steal? I'm going to get it anyway. Elavos, I don't believe it. And this is repeated through at least 3 times in the Torah that I'm aware of. Here, in Parshas by Gezel Ager, which is Parshas Nasei, and according to Rosh Hashiva, the way he interprets whatever Ivri follows Matan Torah. To tell you that Gezel is the word. This is something that a child would learn this as a little kid. He won't ever take anybody else's. He knows that God can give it to me, and this is a big Aveira. This is a terrible Aveira. It's not just a love of taking something that's not mine, but taking something because I'm lessening God's ability. He won't take it. And that's why it's important, this thing. Now there's another essay, there's another Korban Osham called Osham Toli, where a person does an Aveira, but he doesn't know he did an Aveira. He's gone to discussions of what that means. You don't know what you did an Aveira. But I'm not sure if I already did an Aveira or not. In other words, I ate chazer, or I mean, the chazer is not a Korban, it's chaylev. And he knows he ate chaylev, but he wasn't aware of it at the time, and then he became aware. Okay, he has been chatas. But even after eating it, he's not aware if he really ate chaylev or not. I'm not sure if I really did chaylev or not. So however the case the Gemara comes out with, you have to bring an Osham Toli. And an Osham Toli costs 2 shekel, as opposed to a chatas, which can cost a penny, if we share such a thing. But it costs a penny, and an Osham has to have a minimum value of 2 shkolim. Why? Why is it worse to not know what you did completely than to know you did an Aveira? So according to Rosh Hashiva Zatzal, he taught me, well, it's important to know what you're doing. You can't ever use that as an excuse, I don't know what I did. I have to know, always be aware of what I'm doing. That's why it's important. And when I heard from Mashkiach of Michael Birnbaum, a little bit different, or maybe try to work it out, so somehow they're really saying the same thing, is he said it's because a person makes an excuse for himself when he's not sure that he didn't have I probably didn't. And therefore, to make aware that you did something that's an avera by not knowing what you did, that's a point we stress you have to pay double, or whatever, whatever the two shkolim, as opposed to if you know what you're doing. And that's an important lesson. In a way, they both are the same thing. If you work on it hard enough, you'll see what I mean. And I think that that lesson is a very important one, again, for kids to know. You have to be aware of what you are doing. It's no excuse to say, I didn't mean it, I didn't think about it, I didn't want to have it. You have to be aware of what you are doing. And I'm saying if they teach all these halachas and all these things, and maybe as we go along, we'll point out more as we go along through the rest of Vayikra, we'll see how important Vayikra is to teach the little kids. Have a good Shabbos and Hatzlacha Rabbah to everybody. Shabbos. You're on a rush. We know this. Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos to
Shabbos,
good Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos, good Shabbos. Shabbos. Purim got in there.
Yeah.
Hey, the problem is what about next week, Taki?